What's going on, everybody? Hope you are having a wonderful week so far. Podcast time. Dean Wilson, owner of 720 Management Group, has an insane CV in the music industry. Manager of Deadmau5, previous manager of Calvin Harris, Duke Dumont, Chris Lake, Knife Party. The list goes on. He has achieved so many things in this industry under the bracket of a manager. Also in his early careers as a DJ producer. I've known Dean for a while and we've had many conversations over the years, mostly in clubs. It's never been in that much detail. So I really wanted to get him on and kind of pick his brains and just really get into how he's achieved what he's achieved. So without further ado, Dean Wilson.
Environment, because anything could go wrong. I have 2 dogs, a cat, and 2 kids, and a wife.
Just worry about the wife the most, I reckon. That's the one that's going to cause the most fuss, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it'd be much more enjoyable podcast with Jessica than me.
Dean Wilson, how are you, mate?
I'm well, Will Clarke. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Good. Can't complain. A little bit tired, but apart from that, all good.
Yeah,
good.
I always feel like it's the August. You get to the middle or the end of August, and you know the end of summer's coming, and it's been, you've done so much traveling, and you've been hot, and the weather's, and you're like, God, actually, I'm really tired.
But does it ever end? This is the thing, and I'm sure you've seen this over the years, right? Because I think summer used to be the really busy season for every artist, every DJ kind of. Yeah. It used to be like carnage.
Yeah.
But nowadays it just seems like it doesn't ever end.
No, and I think seasons got longer and longer and longer. And I just think that business is such a juggernaut of a worldwide business that, if you've got a decent business, it doesn't stop around the world, because there's always summer somewhere, and there's always nightclubs and there's always festivals going on. So you're right, it doesn't end anymore like we used to remember it back in the day.
Well, I think that's the thing is festival kind of culture has grown massively over the last 10 years to the extent where there's a festival in every city and they just get bigger and bigger. I know the UK has suffered massively with festivals, like a lot of festivals kind of going under this summer and over the last couple of years. But generally in America, it feels like there's a new festival popping up every year and it just seems to just be growing.
It's crazy, right? Because when you think about how small England is, you can fit 3.5 Englands or Great British Isles in California, to put that into context. And you think how big America is, it's hard to comprehend. And you think about how many festivals try to happen in England and Scotland and Ireland. And you're like, well, of course they can't all work.
Yeah. I think also expendable cash. I know there's it goes a little bit more political and kind of talking about the economy, but in America, I generally think, from my experience in comparison to the UK, is just a lot more people have expendable cash in America. Or the people that do have expendable cash have a lot more.
I think you're right in the metropolitan city and surrounding big places. I think you're right. I think, there are a lot of horror stories over here. They just don't make the headlines, and they don't make the headlines like they do in the UK scene. There's things that haven't worked this year. And I think world economy, I think I think everybody's just, me personally, you say, oh, inflation came down in the US last month by 0.5%. I'm like, well, not in my pocket. What?
Exactly.
What planet of inflation are you talking about? Because I go to the gas station and it's more expensive. I go and do the food shopping and it's a lot more expensive. So real life inflation is not coming down. And that's money in pocket, right?
And you live in California, so they've just put the taxes up by 2.5% extra as well, right?
You don't remind me of that.
Dude, how do they get away with it?
I don't know, and it's still a deficit. I just can't understand it. I look at federal, state, sunshine tax. I mean, it's you can understand why people move to Nevada and Florida and
Texas.
It's insane that you live in a country where there's certain states where there are different taxations. I mean, can you imagine that in England? I'm going to move to Kent because there's a different rate of tax there. People would be like, what?
Yeah. It is mad. It is mad. But then I was listening to a podcast the other day. The GDP of the taxes that are earned in California is as big as Germany.
Yeah. Isn't it third or fourth biggest GDP in the world?
It's mental. It's absolutely mental. And there's still God knows how many homeless people on the streets. But that's another conversation.
We could be there all day with that one.
Yeah, you're never going to change that. So let's get into it. For those who don't know who you are, can you give us a little bit of a background of what you do?
I am Dean Wilson. I've been in the music business from early mid-90s. I was selling records out of the back of my mum's 3-door Fiesta. That's how I started. Blagged myself a job at Essential Direct in Brick Lane. Took the worst route because no one wanted to do it. And then worked my way up there to really the explosion of UK garage with myself, Sarah Lockhart, who is married to Zinc and started Rinse FM, and Andy Culver, who's still at Prime Direct in the UK, and the guys Kevin Andrews and Gary Deadman and Chris Hansen. We were like kings of UK garage distribution at that point. And that kind of led into me being a DJ, a producer. My last store on my route ended at a record shop called Big Apple Records in Croydon, run by John, and Scream and Benga worked there on after school and on Saturdays. I think they were 13 or 14, maybe even younger. And above that shop was a record studio run by Arthur Smith, who is Magnetic Man. He was D&D. He was DYNK. He was Jazzy M's producer. His artwork now.
Yeah.
And we used to end there and make records and just have fun. We never really thought about it as a business. It was really myself and Andy Culver made records that we liked to sell on the back of our own vans, and it kind of exploded. And then Andy found some kid called Daniel Bedingfield who worked in Starbucks coffee in Croydon, and he had this record called "Gotta Get Through This," and there was no main bridge, and there was really no chorus. And he came into the studio, and we wrote "Gotta Get Through This," and all of a sudden it exploded, and we had a 3-week number one, and we were like, "What is going on here? This is crazy."
That record was also so pivotal for garage in the UK on like a commercial level, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was. I look back at it now, we had no clue what we were doing. We got ripped off so badly. We had management that was ripping us off. Shabs at Relentless ripped us off.
Fucking managers.
I lost my publishing, even though I was told I was being a publishing partner. I mean, I learned all the things not to do as a manager. So I'm, in some ways, I wouldn't be sitting here today if I was managed properly.
Yeah.
But it turned me into who I am today because, I look back at, man, just disgusting people. But I didn't really, it was such a blur. It was a 2-week number one before Christmas, and then it dropped to 3, and then the first week of January the next year went back to number one. And I'd flown to Miami, to hang out with some friends, with another one of my friends, and we're driving down Ocean Drive, and we stopped for something for lunch, and I'm like, wait, that's what they playing the record in America, and it was such a shock that I was in America. I was not there on work. I was there. We went and played golf. And there was a record being played in America. And I'd never even thought about America. To that moment in time, I'm like, well, there really wasn't a dance music scene back then. I mean, there wasn't Insomniac, there wasn't EDC, there was no big festivals. There wasn't really an American superstar. Yes, there was Vasquez and Danny and those people in pockets in New York.
Yeah.
And maybe, you had the San Francisco scene with the End Up and Mark Farina, and, you had those two, and it really felt like there was nothing else, because no one went over the pond, and no one came back over the pond.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like no one paying any attention. All of our focus was obviously Radio 1 and Ibiza, and that's all we cared about. And it was amazing parties and having a great time, and no one really thought about a long-term business strategy. It was just having the time of your life with your mates.
Wow, amazing. So
that's really kind of where it started from, and then from there it was, I could see technology started to appear.
Yeah.
Right. CD players. I was a resident at a club in Gillingham in Kent, where I think maybe I was the first or second person to give Nick Fanciulli a DJ slot when he was 14 or 15 years old. And between Maidstone and Gillingham, which were 20 minutes from each other, and as they call it, the Maidstone Mafia, from Mark Knight to Club Class to Surge to the River Bar to the Source to all of those, and then Nick, coming out of that scene, and Mark and Tool Room, and it was crazy. As Pete Simon always says, "What's the fuck's in the water in Kent?" And Pete came from Kent too, and it was a crazy moment, I suppose, in time of being in the right place at the right time, of the explosion of dance turning into a massive global business.
And it turned into one of the biggest businesses.
Yeah. And then I was in the club, and the guy who was the other resident would come in, and he would have burnt CDs. And I went, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, I download this track that I can't find anywhere else. I found it on the internet, on LimeWire or wherever else, Napster or wherever it is." He said, and then I burn it onto this CD, and we put it in this machine. It was just a 2-player CD machine under the decks, and there was no way to speed it up or slow it down. You kind of had to work out the BPM, and you would write it on the CD, and you try and match it up the best you can. You couldn't really mix it in, and you just mix it in as fast as you could. And I'm like, oh fuck, mine was dead. At that point, I just had it just went off in my head. I was like, what are we going to do?
Yeah,
this could be the death of vinyl. And then I remember the first CDJ, and I'm like, well, this is CDs instead of Technics 1210s, and it's game over, and everything's available online. We can't make any money here, can't sell any vinyl. Fuck, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And it kind of fell into management at that point, because I'm like, well, I don't want to sell records out the back of the van for the rest of my life. We were kind of helping a lot of people out anyway. We were learning a lot about the music business in the wrong way. And then we just started helping people out. And that, I think, King Unique, if you remember those guys.
I don't.
We would, some amazing stuff back in the day, sort of progressive. That was my passion, really, was Sasha, John, Rowan Blades, Breeder, that whole progressive scene that was the real underground superstars, right? Sasha.
Yeah.
And then, they were the first people really that I'd ever knew that did a tour, Delta Heavy and those tours. And, and then, so we had a couple of partners along the way. I had one of my best friends at the time, Andy Rutherford, was kind of just helping me out while I was trying to do a million things. And then I was putting out, we had another company called A&D Press, which was pressing, manufacturing and distribution of vinyl.
Yeah.
And then we started to do a bit of licensing. And then, someone wants to book me. Can you help me out? Okay, great. What's an agent? Okay, well, let's see if we can find agents. And then we go, the default was Rachel Birchwood.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember Rachel. Yeah. And there was little pockets of these tiny little agents. There was really no WME. There was no UTA. There was no CAA doing anything in the dance lane. It just, it was mates booking mates kind of vibe and doing swap bookings. And then we started booking people we worked out that we could get people down to Maidstone or Kent earlier, and then they'd go back to London and play late at Ministry or Heaven or Fabric or one of the ones that went till 7, 8 in the morning. So we could get them down to play like a 12 till 2 slot. And then we started booking Judge Jules and Seb Fontaine and Tall Paul and Pete Walderman, Tony DeVitt. And that started the network relationship kind of vibe. And then Chris Lake rang me and would hassle me on iMessage or AOL. AOL Messenger.
AOL.
Yeah, or BlackBerry BBM.
I never had a BlackBerry. I never had one of those.
Good God. I miss my BlackBerry still. I just miss the keyboard. And he was a postman in Scotland, and he would work like, I think it was like 2 a.m. till 7 or 8, and then he'd go home and he'd finish off his records and he'd send me records, and then we started putting some records out and stuff started to pop off, and then Chris was like, well, why don't you manage me? And I was like, sure. And then Chris makes changes, and off goes Chris's career. And I think it went to number 3 or 4 in the UK charts. And we partnered with Surge at the time at Club Class, and they're doing live bookings and we're doing everything else. And it goes well for a while. And they have the big Club Class night in Maidstone, which is kind of the first super club in Kent. And then, it kind of starts to really motor from there on out. And, we go our separate ways at one point, and then, we start, first of all, it was 24 management, and then it morphed into my relationship with Mark Gillespie. And Mark was working at God's Kitchen in Birmingham. And Gaz Brooks, who's the big promoter at Footfall in Vegas, and Mickey Slim was a resident there, and all those people from that Birmingham scene, and we'd go up there once a month and play in the back room, and they would be making records as punk rock. Him, James Allgate, Jimmy Hill, and there was somebody else, and they would send the DAT down, and we would knock up these basically bootlegs. They would they were doing mashups, and then we'd go up there once a month and give them an envelope of cash. And that's how that relationship started. And Mark rings me one day and says, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I'd like to get into management. I've found this guy on MySpace. Mark was brilliant at working a system out of finding or going through MySpace and finding acts or finding music. And he said, I found this kid called Adam Wiles. His artist name's Calvin Harris. And I'll go, yeah, sure. I'll do it with you. he couldn't afford to. He's still in Birmingham for a long time till he found. I think he was living with Milo's manager. Drop the pressure.
Wow!
I think at some point in London, and then Calv writes, "I created disco," which the seminal album of albums.
Yeah,
and you're like, wow, this guy is crazy talented, and then we're just about, we're running around London. people want to sign it, and we just about agreed a deal, shook hands with Guy Holmes at Gut Records. And at the time, this is such a bizarre story, Guy rings after we shake hands and said, "Oh, I'm going to be back in a couple of days. I'm flying to Dubai. I'm managing Michael Jackson." And I go, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm going to." I'm like, what is he talking about? Anyway, we haven't signed. And then me and Andy are going back to Victoria Station to get the train home. And the phone rings, and it's Mike Pickering who's at Columbia at Sony at the time, which is M People, massive band in the 80s and 90s, massive hits with Heather Small. And it was Mike's band, M People, was Mike's People. And I'm like, what, the Mike Pickering? Hacienda,
Legend.
the seminal DJ of culture in the UK. And he goes, yeah. He said, what's going on, Calvin? I was like, I think we're just about signed to Gut. He's like, don't sign the Gut. Whatever you do, don't sign. I was like, what? He's like, don't. Can you give me a day? I was like, what? He said, can you get Calvin down here tomorrow? I want to meet Calvin. And I'm like, well, sure. I would get him on a train. Yeah, don't worry. We can get him on a train or whatever. And he comes down and they sign Calvin. And
wow.
To say Guy Holmes was mad is an understatement. In the end, he doesn't manage Michael Jackson, and the rest, the rest is history. And Calvin's the frontman of a 5-piece band for 4 years, maybe 2 or 3 years. With his mates from Scotland as the band.
I remember actually seeing Calvin in the band warming up for Faithless in Cardiff Arena. I remember it was like his debut tour, like as Calvin Harris in the band. Yeah. It's very, very different to what it is now.
Just a little. And then we did a Groove Armada tour as well. And it's really hard to make money as a band. And I remember just even the tour support, it didn't make any money. Yes, we'd signed the album, whatever, but and Calvin was motoring, but I think I just one day just woke up and just said, I think I just want to be a DJ. I don't think I want to do it with the band anymore. And that was the smartest decision Cal probably ever made. And now, he's the global superstar that he is, and he's still Cal to me, and he's the best writer, producer in the world, I think, let alone dance. I mean, he is hands and above the best dance producer, writer of all time. I mean, no one's ever going to get anywhere near him ever in our lifetime, maybe ever. So
I agree. I think he's
the hits.
I think he's in the same realm as the Max Martins, realistically, and kind of like the real pop.
I agree, 100%.
Writers.
Yeah,
it's
and he's and I think the difference is it's all Calv.
Yeah,
you look at Max Martin or Dr. Luke. There's a massive team now, like a team of writers, and they've got massive producer units on everything. It's Calv. Calv's doing everything. He is the superstar of superstars, not just because he is the star, as in the DJ, it's Calvin Harris, but behind the scenes, it's also all Calvin.
It's absolutely amazing as well, because you look at as an artist, as like me as an artist career, is like you see the percentages of like what artists get, what songwriters get, and everything like that, and then when you have 100% of everything, and you're like, damn son, and you have 100% of a billion streamer. Obviously, you got the label involved and everything like that, but still, like, you're in a level of just no one does that nowadays. No one.
No. It's. I mean, that's what I say. He's the unicorn. He really is. And he's not just a dance unicorn. He's a unicorn because he does do it all, and he's brilliant at it.
So when so along that journey, Deadmau5 comes involved.
Yeah, Chris Lake again. I mean, Chris, and people need to understand that this about Chris. Not only is he a good friend and one of my very first clients, and now we're back in business together with Brett and the boys, but Chris has never been anything else but Chris. What you see as Chris today was Chris back then, and he is one of the loveliest human beings on the planet, but also phenomenally talented. Are in the studio, but also spotting trends, finding people. And he sent me one day, he sent me some, I think one was BSOD, This Is the Hook, and there was another Deadmau5 record. I can't remember exactly what it was. And he said, yeah, listen to these records. I was like, okay, like he would do all the time. So I was like, there's something sonically different about this record. He goes, right? I said, who's Deadmau5? He goes, right? He goes, so I'm like, he said, I found him. He's in Toronto. I'm gonna go and fly out and see Geeta in Detroit because that's where Geeta lived, and we're gonna drive up to Toronto and go and see him. I got to find out. God, I've got to know more about this guy. It's just something. There's something about the music sonically I can't put my finger on. It's different, and it was kind of the explosion of electro house that moment, right? And he goes there, and there's that awesome video online of Chris, Geeta, and in Joel's tiny, not even as big as this room, apartment, where under the sofa Chris can't even stand up. And he's got this tiny table with the little speakers, and he's got this little Voyager, and he's got the setup, and Chris is there, and he's, Geeta's video in the old, I can't even remember what technology she was using. And there's a funny part where Geeta's got her rubber gloves on in the kitchen, cleaning Joel's kitchen up because it's, a single guy living on his own. And they make, what did they make? Desynchronized. They make 2 or 3 records while Chris is there.
Yeah. And
while he's there, Joel goes, well, I need help. I need a manager. Can you help me out? And he goes, oh, why don't you, look, I'll hand the phone over, his name. And how you doing? Yeah, great. Can you help me? I was like, sure. What, you're not managed or you haven't got any deals, right? He was like, no, I'm all clean, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, all right, well, yeah. I mean, at the time, I didn't realize how technically savvy he was, and how he was the king of trolls and the troller extreme, and he was the first person that I'd ever learned that from. The Toronto trance community chat room, which was one of the biggest in North America. And he would go in there trolling people all day long, and his numbers would just keep going like this because he would just drop bombs in there, not in a bad way. He would just get people so fired up who were passionate about Tiesto or Armin or whatever was going on in the trance scene, and he would just go in there and just get them all riled up, and we create this, people talking about him, and then I get a phone call one day from a lady called Melanie Mel Fresh, and from Play Records, and she goes, hey, how you doing? I'm like, good, who's this? She just goes, oh, this is Mel. I manage Joel, and he's signed to my record label, and he's publishing. And I go, I'm sorry, what? He said he didn't tell me this. And she goes, no, he probably didn't. And I go, well, well, okay, well, how are you anyway? Blah, blah, blah. And then, long story short, she goes, well, would you consider, co-managing? And I was like, no, I don't do co-managing because it never works. And she goes, okay, well, I'm not going to hold him back. If that's what he wants to do, he can go and do it. So then so I said, cool, can you send me the contracts? So she sends me the contracts, and I'm like, there's the contracts. And I sent it back to him and said, you're managed, you're signed, and your publishing is signed. He goes, no, I'm not. I went, all right, check your inbox. And he goes, I didn't sign those. And I go, is that your signature? He goes, yeah, it looks like my signature. I don't remember signing them though. And I'm like, oh, well, there's hundreds of those stories. No lawyer, didn't realize what was going on, whatever. I just need money, there's thousands of those stories, sadly. And, them two fall out. She ends up suing everybody, including me, him, and everything else. We have to do a settlement. He loses everything from Facts in Berlin all the way back, masters and publishing, and we have to pay her some money to go away, and and that still rolls on today because he's still passionately hurt about what happened there, and we don't own and control one of his seminal pieces being Facts in Berlin, which was the start of the explosion of progressive house from Deadmau5 and Pete Tong playing that record, and the explosion of, most people called it back then Deadmau5, and it just going crazy. And, for the first, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years of us managing Calvin, Joel, Chris Lake, Feed Me, a bunch of other acts, James Talk, Parlo Mojo, Nick Fanciulli. Joel was the superstar, and it was meteoric rise from 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11. It was a crazy ride of building a worldwide business and brand. And I say that a lot, is the human being is Joel Zimmerman, but he was always very clear. He went, I want to be a worldwide act, and I'm not a DJ, and I want production. And I remember him showing us the 9 Inch Nails production. He's friends with Trent and Danny Lohner and all the 9 Inch Nails guys. And his best friend is Steve Duda. Steve Duda, if for everyone that doesn't know, Steve created and built Serum, which nearly every producer in the EDM lane has used or uses. And there's a new version coming that Steve's very excited about in the next couple of months. But Steve was in the studio, and he was the engineer, and he was the recording engineer, and that's how they all became friends. And Steve is one of the loveliest human beings on the planet, but also unbelievably smart, technology-wise. And but he said, "Look at this production," and I go, "Wow, this is crazy." It's when Trent looks like he's wiping. There's this waterfall over the band, and Trent looks like he's wiping off the water, and you're like, what? And it was a see-through kind of film or whatever. And I'm like, that is amazing. He went, we have to be that good.
Yeah.
And I went, well, that's going to cost a fortune. He went, I don't care what it costs. That's how good we have to be.
Yeah.
And that was the start of us. I talked to Paul McRae, who's still at 360, to leave his job at Accenture, where he was had a really senior position installing computers into Sainsbury's supermarkets. And he took a 3-month sabbatical and obviously never went back, and became Joel's tour manager. And we then did our research, and we went, who designed the Daft Punk pyramid? And then we went and found Martin Phillips. And we said, Martin, Joel's got this vision. Here's Joel. You guys nerd out. And he went, okay. And the Cube was born. And that And that was the start of different iterations of what you see today. And, of Joel's production and that, but he pushes the boundaries like no one I've ever worked with, because he understands and wants to, he's like the guy or the kid that wants to break it to understand how it works and then put it back together again. And he does that with everything, like every piece of technology.
Yeah, he's a true tech head, isn't he?
Yeah, I think because of the understanding of computers and computer languages and technology. And, you have to, it's hard to explain how smart he is. It really is. You put him in a room with a bunch of like-minded people, he can hold his own.
Yeah.
It's very rare that someone can out-tech him or think him or technology, understanding of technology. So, you just, it's hard to find the right people. For me, it's always been hard to find the people that can actually, one, do what, as far as he wants to take it, but then can also help him get there.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people say, I can build that, I can do that. There's some lights, there's some video, here's some people that can make the content, and this is how you're going to control it. And Joel goes, no, I want to do it this way, this way, this way, and this way. And they go, well, that's not how we do it. He goes, well, I don't care, I want to do it this way.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now the pool of people that you can pull from, God, is super, super narrow.
But I think that's also like going to kind of talking about the manager role. That is the important thing of a manager, right? Is to be able to find the correct team that works well with the artist, not the other way around. Because realistically, the artist is the one that's actually controlling all of this.
Well, I always say, people have asked this question a lot when I do panels, podcasts, or just advice in general. And I said, what makes a good manager? And I say the same thing like you just said. The good manager is managing a team. Like, I always say that I'm the CEO of the businesses. I'm the CEO of Deadmau5 and Mousetrap and anything else we do. Joel's the artist.
Yeah.
That's the brand. And then, I sit and then I find and put all the right teams in place and then manage all the right teams. And that's the way I explain good management to anybody. It's not all about me. I don't do everything, and I don't know everything. And I think I say that to the staff and the team all the time. I said, I don't know everything. There is no stupid question, and this business changes daily, hourly, weekly, monthly, and the more that technology drives, the faster innovation and things change from how we do everything: play, perform, market, social media, phones, computers, everything changes so fast. You've always got to keep up and learn. And like I said, everyone, don't be frightened to ask a question, because don't assume anything, because it makes an ass out of you and me.
For sure. So I want to go back to when Joel said, I want to be a global brand. I want to be globally recognized as an artist, and Deadmau5 as a brand. As a manager, what's like, it's a massive ask for an artist to come to you and say that, right? And I feel like, if I'm totally honest, every artist wants that, right? But not every artist can achieve that. It's been like, even, I can only talk for myself. It's like, it's been something that I've always wanted, but never achieved at this moment in time. So where, as a manager, when somebody comes to you and says, this is what we need to achieve, where the hell do you even start?
It's a great question. I get asked it a lot. And I say my first answer is always the same. We're in the music business. Never forget, we're in the music business. If you don't have the music, that's our tools to be able to do our job properly. Now, that's not the only thing, right? Because you've got to have this special sauce that you can't. Some people have got it, and some people haven't. And that's the same in whether you're talking about footballers, whether you're talking about golfers, whether you're talking about pop stars or DJs. You know, it's like you look at Fisher and you go, he's a superstar. You look at him online, he knows how to work a crowd. He knows how to engage online. He's like I say, the box ticking exercise.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Calvin's got the records. He has the hits of the hits. Calv's got the music.
He doesn't need anything else, does he? That's the thing.
You know, he's got a great show. He's a great DJ now. He knows how to put on a great show, and he can just play all of his hit records.
Yeah.
And he could be out there for 8 hours and not get through all of his hit records. So what you get in a 90-minute set is, you know, a bunch of hits, and that's, and I always say to everyone, what do you want to do if you buy a ticket to go to a show? Why are you doing that? Well, I love that act, I love that band, and I want to hear the records that I love so much, so I can sing along and have a great time with my friends and have this amazing moment where we went to that show and we were all there having a great time singing along to our favorite records.
Yeah,
we're in the music business, so that's my first point of call. You know, whether it's you're making underground techno or you're making Calvin Harris hits, you still, in that whatever lane that is, you've still got to be able to make the music, and I think that is the most important thing to start with. Now, I think we were lucky at the time. Joel Zimmerman, same name, you can't make it up, was the agent. He had just come from working at one of the biggest US agencies that were doing Sasha and Digweed, which is Chaotica, Jerry, Jimmy Van Em, and that crew. And he'd come out of that falling apart, started his own little thing called Division One, and he became our North American agent. And within a very short period of time, Mark Geiger at William Morris said, we're getting in the dance. Yeah. And Joel was one of their first hires, and David Levy was running the UK. And those were our two agents. And
for anybody that doesn't know, they, at that time, were the biggest agents in the world.
Well, Joel wasn't at the time. He had some good DJs, but he wasn't the superstar agent that he became. Yeah. David was a little different, right? Because he'd done Bjork, you know, he was doing Fatboy Slim when Norman and, you know, broke the beach in Brighton and all those things. And so David was already a superstar agent, and you know, he had the juice and the leverage, but we sat with them and Joel explained what he wanted to do, and off they went. And, you know, I think we did in 2010 or 2011, we did 186 shows.
Wow.
And it nearly killed everybody. But there was 186 shows around the world. So the traveling and how brutal that was. And, you know, he came out that year and said, we're never doing that again. And then, it got get more and more condensed with more and more of the show instead of just the guy that put the mouse head on. But Joel's strategy in North America was incredible. I was just talking to Kevin. I was with Kevin Gimbel, who's our agent now at UTA. And, you know, everybody knows when Joel Zimmerman was at his best back in the day, you know, he was the best agent ever. And David was the same in the UK and Europe. And between the two, you know, we hit the jackpot. And they did incredible things, and they made things happen on certain shows and big events, and like Wireless in the Park and stuff like that. Shows that you shouldn't have been on at that point of your career. They could make happen. And, you know all those big moments in 2009, 10, 11, 12, where Deadmau5 was, you know, from Lollapalooza to Wireless to everywhere. You know, he got every one of those slots. You can see it happening now with Fish. You can see it happening now with John Summit.
Yeah.
You know, you can see that when you get that superstar meteoric rise, and everybody wants it at that point. And that was really it. And then learning and having to learn how to put a tour together. I mean, we didn't know how to do that, you know, and you're like, oh my God, this is really expensive. Holy shit. You know, and we get on a bus for the first time and we're like, wow, look at us. We're all grown up. We're on a tour bus and we've got a truck and we've got, you know, 8 crew and whatever. And I'm like,
how much?
We're making no money.
Yeah.
Zero. In fact, we're losing money. But Joel was always smart enough to know that I do this, this, and this, and this, and this, and that's the business.
Yeah.
If this tour inside with this production breaks even or doesn't make so much money or makes a little bit of money, that's okay because it's about the whole, some of the whole. And he loved doing the show because he was like, I'm not a DJ.
Yeah.
You know, even though now he's on CDJs and a V10 and now as he laughs, look at me now as a DJ. You know, but you know, he's nearly 20 odd years in and he can do whatever the fuck he wants to do now because he's done that. But he still loves the production shows. That's his passion and his element. And I don't think that'll ever stop. Because that's what sets him apart and he knows that. You know, he's not the EDM guy, you know, he's I'll call him in there, like Daft Punk's over here, Joel's over here, EDM's here, and then you get, you know, like Aphex Twins over here, and you know what I mean? You get the different planets, and he doesn't, you know, he plays in the EDM planet from time to time because, you know, you're still making dance music, so you do that, and you know, you got the Vegas residency because he goes in and plays the hits now, and he's okay with that now.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think the long-winded answer to your question is, how do you make a global business? You know, 1, music. 2, you got to have the right strategy, and then you got to have the right agents that have got leverage and juice, and that's hard to find them now. It wasn't back in the day because it was brand new. There wasn't superstar global touring DJ electronic producer eyes. There just wasn't.
There wasn't Instagram there. Facebook was just starting, if you know what I mean. Like all of this, this whole industry TikTok wasn't around. All of this is so different. Streaming wasn't around. It was all Beatport and radio.
That's right. 2007, Mousetrap was born, and Head was kind of born at the same time. And I remember sitting in my spare room in Maidstone in Kent, and then we forget the phone call. He's like, I think I'm going to make the mouse head, and I'm going to wear it when I DJ. And I went, hey, what? He's like, you know, the logo. I'm going to make it. I went, what? And what? Put it on your head? And he goes, yeah. I was messing about in 3D CAD design, and because it's all spheres, 2 circles, a major circle, half a circle, right? So he was just messing about in design, and I can't remember the guy's name now, but one of his friends in a rock band, because that's really where he's, you know, best friend's Tommy Lee, and he loves Slayer and rock bands and stuff like that. So he photoshops it, or whatever it was back then, onto this guy, and it's hilarious, and it's just like him joking around, and he goes, and the guy goes to him, oh, you should make that and wear it. And he goes, oh, maybe I'll give that a shot. And I remember putting the phone down going, oh my God, this is either going to be over in 10 seconds because this is just going to get laughed out of the building, or this is going to be monstrous. And there's going to be nothing in between. And
luckily it was the latter.
Monstrous.
It's also interesting that the influence that had on the rest of the scene over the years, right? Of like the masked DJ, right? Like look at what's came out of it.
And to be fair, Daft Punk were already doing it, right? They were the robots, and they had helmets on.
But it was a different era, and also Daft Punk, although they were DJs, they were writing pop songs.
Weren't right, and they weren't DJs either. You know, if you look at that setup, right, it was MIDI controllers, it was laptops, that's where Joel was. Joel was in the Daft Punk lane more than he was in the DJ lane, and you couldn't book Daft Punk as a DJ set.
No, not at all. But I think that's that era. Yes, Daft Punk did it, but I think Joel sat in a different. It was different from my perspective as like in the industry. I never kind of put two and two together as he's copying Daft Punk, but what came out of that scene, the Marshmallows of the world and things like that, like. You can roll your eyes, but realistically, like, I truly think he started that.
Oh, 100%. I mean, Marshmallows are the most obvious thing. Is Mo created something that would be more commercial than Deadmau5, and Chris would never take their helmet off.
Yeah.
So you never knew was underneath there.
Exactly.
You know, Joel didn't want to do that. Joel, it was a point, when it was going like this, where Joel, he kind of had a moment with him, with the head. It was like I'm the guy. He's not the mouse. And I remember we had the residency at Amnesia at Cream in Ibiza, and we obviously had to always check the head, and the head didn't make it. And Mo, who was the promoter for Cream in God Rest His Soul.
Rest in peace, Mo.
Yeah, who I loved dearly, and so did Joel. He turns up and he's like, "Oh, great, where's the head?" And Joel goes, "Oh, it didn't make it." And he was like, "Well, he can't play." He's like, "Can't go in there without a massive. We'll get crucified." And Joel's like, Are you for real? It was like, I play the music. He was like, "Yeah, but we need the mouse head. Look, it's everywhere." It was that moment, I think it was a real it was like it was, and it took a while, I think, for him to, whatever. It was, did the mouse head become bigger than the person? Yes, for a long while before they coexisted in who they are. And now it's, it took a long while for the parody to become,
totally.
There's the human being and that's the mouse head. It's Joel. This is the mouse.
Yeah, makes complete sense. So you go from 360, Joel, Calvin, everybody else under the name, in the world. Like, you and Mark go your separate ways. 720 becomes into the picture, right?
Look, we had very different acts.
Mm-hmm.
Joel, we did the first ever 360 deal with EMI, which was a horrible mistake because they made out that they were going to be great partners and they were terrible partners, and they just a record company making out that they wanted to be involved in all the rights, and it was a disaster. And I spent the next 4 years making sure that, we get out of it, and we ended up buying ourselves out of that deal. But we built the label together, label publishing. I spent years making sure that we could control his rights or buy his rights back.
Yeah.
Because I realized that, we were fiercely independent, and we don't play the major record game.
Yeah.
So we should be independent, and these labels should always put his music out. And that was my mentality 7-8 years ago. In 2017, I said to Jess, my wife and business partner at the time, I said, I don't want to do 360 anymore. And she was like, "What do you mean?" I said, "It's just not what I want to do. It's making me not want to do this business and miserable. I don't want to do Travis Scott or run a company that's 80 people deep and 3 offices around the world as partners with Rock Nation and Jay-Z. I don't want to do hip hop. I don't want to do film and TV. And it was just making me ill. It really was. And I just said to Mark one day, I was like, buy me out. You can have the company. I'm not precious about it. I'm not like that. I just want to go and do what I want to go and do that's going to make me happy.
Yeah.
And that was the end of that. And
how is that process? Sorry to butt in, but like, how is that process? Is like for you as a human being, and you as a manager, and you as somebody looked at in the industry as like a massive player in not just the electronic music industry, in the music industry generally. How is that? How is that like on a mental level? How is that on a personal level to kind of just like work that out and also like get to the level of like accepting that and kind of moving forward?
That's fucking hard. I'll make no bones about it. That was a tough point in my life. In every level, you know. I'd had a young family. You know, I worked with Jessica at Ultra Records and then at 360. Then you know, working with your wife, living with your wife, having, you know, a young family. And then it started to, you know, it started to be really difficult at 360. And then we lost our COO at the time, who was great at running the business. And then by default, we didn't find the right person to replace him. And then by default, I kind of stepped into that position. And at the time I was managing Pendulum, Knife Party, Duke, Dumont, Deadmau5, and trying to run a company. Yeah. And it was too much. You know, that's not why I got into the music business.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's emotional talking about it now. I don't really talk that much about it in any depth to anybody about it. You know, I've always skim over a moment in time of a timeline in history, right? But man, that mentally, you know, that nearly took me down. And I knew I had to do something. I knew I had to stop the train for me, you know, and I couldn't be a father and enjoy the music business and do what I wanted to do if I continued to do that. And where Mark wanted to go, I didn't. It's not me. You know, we're very different people.
Yeah.
You know, I'm 10 years older than Mark. I have a family and I'm married.
Yeah.
He does not. You know, it's hard in this business. You know how hard it is, the travel, the late hours, the weekends, the stress, all of the stressful things you have to deal with on a daily, weekly basis. And have a life, or try and have a life, and have a family, and be a dad and a husband. Something's going to break. Something gives. You know, you look at this business and look at all the successful people. They're littered with, you know, difficult things that have happened in their life, marriages, families. It's a phenomenally difficult business to do everything. So I knew I had to do something. And the only way I could think about it was, I've got to get off this train.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like, I want to get back to just focusing on Deadmau5's business and managing Joel and being Joel's business partner in the label and the label publishing and any of the other ventures that we do. And I just wanted to get back to being and enjoying it again. I really did. And and I wanted to focus really on where I came from, which was the music business. I love being involved in the records and putting the records out and running the labels and publishing and the details and the minute details of how you do that. That's where I came from, and that's what I love and I'm passionate about. And that's really what I wanted to get back to, and, did that, and then the pandemic happens and we finish our last Cube tour in New York on February the 19th. The world shut down on March the 14th. So little did we know that we were in the epicenter of COVID at that point, and people were sick, and we just thought it was the cold and flu.
Yeah.
The core team had come back from China 4 months before, and Ashley, who was the TM, had been really sick for months. Since she came back, she couldn't shake it. There was no tests. There was no COVID test back then. It didn't exist. And she'd been for test after test, and it's bad influenza, and this is what it is. And you just got, and I'm still convinced to this day that she had COVID.
Was she patient zero in America?
She may have been one of the patient zeros. But when you look back and where that was and where they were and where it started, they were in China. It was already rampant in China before they were there.
Yeah.
So, and then COVID happens, and then really come out of COVID I think everybody come out of COVID changed. I don't care whether you know it or you don't know it. You came out of COVID different. We'd never had the world shut down. We'd never been told we have to stay in our house. Was our business over?
Yeah.
I did. There was moments where you got up and went, what do we do now? What happens now? And I just sat there and we did, tried everything. We streamed from the house because that was what we could do, because it was Joel, and NFTs exploded. And when we started to virtual shows, and then, we were moving because we could. We were just trying everything we could just to earn anything. And, Joel was, Joel gets bored very easily. So every day let's do that. Let's try this. Why don't we do that? I'll stream this today. Let's do this. And because he's that guy, he was always at the forefront of trying something new out, whether it's Unreal, whether what we were doing with his mocap suit and did it virtually and in real life from the house. And, he was always doing something else that, look at Joel, look at Deadmau5 now. What the fuck is he doing now?
Yeah.
And so I was lucky that I have Joel, because it's, when you can't go anywhere, I'm sitting in my house, he's sitting in his in-house. What are we doing today? What should we do today?
Yeah.
We should try this. Let's do that. Let's do this. So it was quite interesting once you'd got past the shock and trying to homeschool two kids locked in a house, not being able to go anywhere really. At some point, you weren't even allowed to leave the house.
Yeah.
You became very laser focused on what you could do, which is very narrow. And then we started.
Kind of where. Sorry to jump in there, but I think that's kind of where the next thing that I was moving on from, of like the 360 ending for you making that decision, but then there's also that decision to focus on Deadmau5. And I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about initially of how do you become a great manager? How do you manage a great artist? And it's, for me, from what's coming from this, is just extreme focus on one thing, and making sure that everything is that. And I think, do you think from when the 360 ended, obviously 720 started, but just the real focus on one artist that's kind of leading everything. Do you think that artist can then grow from there?
Oh, 100%. Because you're laser focused. I'll tell you where a lot of it came from. Dave Holmes, who was Coldplay's manager for a long time, and I had lunch or dinner with Dave, and he told me this story about Chris Martin, and Dave was trying to build his management company, And Chris said to him one day, Dave, you have a choice. You either just manage Coldplay or we're going to leave, because if we don't pay you enough money for you to be able to just focus on us, then we need to find somebody else that can just focus on us.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh. And it stuck with me forever. And I mean, they eventually moved on from Dave, but took his team and do it internally. And Chris is a very smart guy, and analyzes it, and they've worked out how they do Coldplay year on, year off, or 2 years on, 2 years off, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it really stuck in my head, and I'm like, what is enough?
Yeah.
Once you get to a certain level with an artist, and that artist is paying you in commissions and your business partners in certain ventures over $1 million a year, surely at some point they have a right to be able to say, are you all in?
Chill, yeah.
Or are you just growing your business? So, I'd had that conversation with Joel. That's how we ended up at 720 Mouse with our ventures and different business and the label publishing. And that was it. Just focus on Joel.
Yeah.
And
did you ever have that conversation as together or with any other artists previously of like, did anyone ever pull you up as a manager and kind of challenge you as a manager of going, Dean, I don't think you're doing enough. I don't think I'm getting enough from you.
Yeah. I think it happened a lot at 360.
Yeah.
Because successful artists are a magnet to the teams and the company. But I can't be in two places at once.
Yeah.
You can't be, Mark can't be, Joel can't be. You cannot be in two places at once. So this is why I always laugh about the agents. I say to my agent friends, how many acts do you have? And they go, what do you mean? I said, how many acts in your bubble? Oh, I don't know, 30, 40. I said, how many assistants? 15, 20. And underneath that, another 10 and blah, blah, blah. I was like, right. And just to put this in context, you want to get paid 10% of the gross and you can have 30 acts. I'm getting paid 10% of the gross and I can only have one act.
Yeah.
Should I have been an agent? No, I joke. But it's the same mentality though, right? They can do that because the more bigger artists they got, the more leverage they've got with the promoters to put and move people about. So I get that. I get that mentality on the agent mentality. But the manager mentality, because you're doing so many different, you're doing the music, you're doing the publishing, you're doing the merchandise, you're doing the touring, you've got all of these revenue
360,
businesses, right? Then you, at some point, one act becomes bigger than the other act. There's always this.
Totally. And
at some point, the really good acts go, how many acts do you have?
Yeah.
And, I saw you with so-and-so at the weekend. Why weren't you at my show?
Yeah.
It's always going to happen.
Yeah.
And you look at all of the greatest managers in the world and you go all the way back to George Martin with the Beatles and all the way through to where we are today. And, you was reading the Bruce Springsteen stuff at the weekend. It was one manager, one act.
Yeah.
And those acts have become superstars and that one manager just focuses on that one act.
It's a tough thing though, right? As a manager, and I'm not defending managers and I'm not really defending artists. I kind of it's weird because let's say for instance with Ryan, my manager, I know
who was an agent.
Who was an agent, yeah.
He went the other way.
And got out. He got out. But there's a level of me as an artist, and realistically, Ryan's one of my best friends. Like he's more than a manager to me, if that makes sense. He's one of my best friends, and if we stopped working together, unless it got really messy, I'm pretty sure we would carry on talking anyway, and we'd still have a relationship. But I think for me is like, as an artist, I want him to be successful as well. And selfishly, there's a part of me that just wants him to purely work on me. But also there has to be a level of reality, is that I have to be successful for him to be successful. And I think there's a level of artists, of me needing a level of success that sometimes managers can't actually make that happen. A manager can't make you successul, right? It's kind of a hot pot of everything working together with a lot.
We're in the music business.
Exactly.
I'll keep saying it.
Yeah.
You know, if you can't make the hits, what's there for the manager to manage?
Exactly. So there's also that other side of it, is like, I want Ryan to take on other artists. I want him to be successful. I want his other acts to be successful, because if Ryan's successful, it means that he's always going to be there around for me, if that makes sense as well. But it is a catch-22, right? There is that level of like, well, hang on a minute, let's hyper focus on something and let's give it a go. Let's give it a shot. But it's also different nowadays.
Well, I remember that conversation with Chris Lake, when it was a very tough conversation because the company was building, Joel was on fire.
Yeah.
Chris found Joel, but I knew I wasn't giving Chris what he needed. And that was hard for me, really hard, because I couldn't do everything. It's impossible. You know, you can put a day-to-day on Chris, but that's not really you doing it. Yeah. Yes, you're having a chat with your day-to-day, and off he goes and does the things. And that's when Chris, I said to, look, you should go with Brett. Brett was working at 360 at the time. Yeah. And Chris, then Brett became Chris's manager. And another really hard thing in my life, you know, having to make that realization and decision. But that was what was best for Chris. It wasn't what was best for me.
No.
Because I lost Chris's revenue to some degree, and more importantly, I missed working with Chris on a daily basis because he's my friend.
Yeah.
And he was there from day one. So for me, that was really difficult. The first really difficult thing I'd had to do as a manager.
Well, I think there's also a huge history behind it, right? Because let's be honest, if it wasn't for Chris, there wouldn't be Deadmau5 in your world. There'd still be a Deadmau5. I too believe that great art always comes through, but it wouldn't necessarily be in your world.
No, I do. Would there be a Deadmau5 without me? Of course, there would have been a Deadmau5. Would Joel probably been a superstar without me? Probably he would have been, because he's fucking a genius and laser focused and graphs and whatever, all of those things that make Joel Deadmau5. So I'm not sitting here saying, "Oh, I created Deadmau5," and I'm not that person. I'm very realistic about what I do, what he does, or any, you know, relationship in management, artist relationship. You know what I mean? It's the sum of the whole that has got us where we are today, and knowing how to run his businesses.
Yeah.
And then deal with the human being.
Yeah.
Because the human being, every single artist is different. There is not one human being that is the same to another in the artist world. You're different to Chris. Chris is different to Joel. Joel's different to Fisher.
Yeah.
And I go on and on and on. Everyone has their own nuances. Everybody has their own personal stuff. Everybody has how they can do things and can't do things. So there is no management 101. Anyone that says that, I'm like, you've got a lot to learn, because it's more about understanding the person. Yeah. You. Who's Will Clarke? What does Will want? What is Where's Will comfortable? Where can you get the best out of Will? How can you help Will the most? That is, for me, what you need to learn as a manager as fast as you possibly can, because you cannot put the one shoe fits all. This is a management 101, because it's not. You're dealing with human beings.
You're a glorified therapist in the grand scheme of things.
I'm glad you said that, because I say that a lot internally. You've got to know when you got to back off. You got to know when you go, no, you're wrong because of this. And I always, Joel can listen to facts. He can listen to data.
Yeah.
I will back that up with, look, this one's my opinion. He's gone on stage before at fucking Beyond Wonderland 3 or 4 years ago and says, enjoy this one before Dean makes me put a vocal on it.
That's so good.
Because Joel wouldn't, I'm pretty sure he would say, if he was here, he was like, I would never put a vocal on any record I've ever made.
Yeah.
But I explained to him, if we want to keep increasing at the level we were, every now and then we have to put a vocal record out that can connect with the wider community.
You've had some pretty good vocal records out there, though, let's be honest.
Yeah, and I tell us a story a lot that Ghosts and Stuff, Jason Ellis was the A&R, and we talked about Ghosts and Stuff, which was an instrumental which was made in a hotel and finished in a hotel room in Manchester before we played Whereas Project to give to Pete Tong that night, because it was Halloween, and that's why it's called Ghosts and Stuff. And he comes out, obviously becomes a monster instrumental, and then Jason goes, how about we put Rob Squire from Pendulum on it? And I'm like, oh, that's not a bad idea. It's kind of edgy. It's left field. Pendulum were an arena act at the time. Rob's a mercurical genius as well. And he writes what he writes. And Joel, it's a vocal. And Joel's like, all right, if I fucking have to. And I'll never forget it. I will never forget it. YouTube's exploding. And the video goes up. Or not even a video. The track goes up on YouTube, and the first comment on there is from a fan going, what the fuck have you done? You've ruined this fucking record. And he rings me and he goes, you've ruined my fucking career. You've ruined my fucking career with this fucking record. This was a terrible idea. You've ruined my fucking career. And I'll go, dude, it's one comment. He was like, yeah, but read this for him. Read that for him. I said, yeah, but these are your core fans that are always just going to be, they don't want you to change. They don't want you to grow. They found you. This is the oldest story in the music book, is when you grow, the core fans hate it because you were their baby. They were there from the start. I said, if we're going to grow a bit bigger, we have to go wider and we have to grow the fan base. And to grow the fan base, we need bigger records, and ultimately we need vocals. And, as I said to him when I gave him his platinum and his double platinum disc, there you go. Do you remember that? Ruined your career. Statement. And, he fuck off. And he laughs, but it's not a constant battle, because we don't battle anymore. We have really smart conversations about it. All the way through to, Escape, and that record, and that record was meant to be a Deadmau5 record. It really was, and we kind of butted heads on it, and over the fact that he felt let's
stop there. It was supposed to be a Will Clarke record.
Correct. I was getting there, right? And it was meant to be a Will Clarke record and a Will Clarke session. I didn't know any of this, and I'm not saying that because we're doing this podcast. No. I'd heard the record. Mickey had sent me the record, and I'm like, oh, my God, I love this fucking vocal. Eddie Jenkins is a massive Deadmau5 fan, so he's always inspired by whatever he's doing musically, chord progression or whatever it is in the studio. I listen to the record and I go, man, we need a monster fucking vocal record. and that was 9-10 months before it had gone away. We could go on for days of what happened behind the scenes. I'm still feel uncomfortable to what happened behind the scenes.
Not at all. I'm not. Anyway, so don't worry about that.
We won't get into that. We won't get into that right now. He really didn't want to put it out. He felt it was too obvious, too I remember-y. And my argument was, but this is your part of your career right now where, you know, we should be doing something like this again. And, you know, it didn't happen. 9-10 months go by. I could never get to a point where we got comfortable with it. Other stuff was happening, obviously, behind the scenes, and that got a little messy. And then we go and sit with Cascade, and they want to make some records together, the anniversary from I Remember, and all these things are happening, and we go and sit with it. And I go, I think we've got the first single. And we're sitting in Cascade's studio. I mean, there must have been, I don't know, 10, 11 of us in there. And I'll never forget his face across the table. And he's like, what? And I play Escape. And Ryan goes, fuck, this is the single. This is the first single. Give me the parts, give me the parts, give me the parts. And Joe goes, all right, fuck it.
We're in.
And now then becomes, you know, the monster that it becomes. And we end up writing, we were only meant to be doing an EP and a couple of shows because we did So Fired together. And we was just like, oh, maybe we'll do a couple of shows. K5 gets born, and all of a sudden there's an album. And, you know, and then, you know, it was into EDC, and then 47,000 tickets at the Coliseum. And I'm like, whoa, this is insane. And, Hayler's born, and the record goes and it's still going, and John Summit's kind of born out of the back of it, you know, and he remixes I Remember, and there's the whole John story, and John wouldn't ever he only got into producing because he loved Ghost and stuff, and I Remember so much. And, you know, then you have the flip side to sorry, the headphones, which I can't see. I don't know where they are. You know, we go from there. It's a crazy, kind of mistaken ride. Yeah. So yeah, it's been an interesting evolution of things that I never thought were gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like, I never thought K5 would explode into what it is. And then Resmouse. I never thought Joel would do back-to-backs. I never thought Joel would use CDJs. It's been a lovely, happy change. Evolution of different ideas. And there's some crazy things coming down the pipe. I don't know when this is going to air, but
me neither, if I'm honest.
He started making some drum and bass.
Sick.
Who'd have, you know, and Joel does things because Joel wants to do things, not because it's a master plan. He's like, I was having some fun. Like, Raise Your Weapon was a dubstep record because dubstep was big at the time, and Joel was like, oh, let's give that a shot. Yeah. And play about with it. And we find the vocal from a band called Picture Book in Denmark. And bizarrely, it's co-written by Sonny Moore and CC Sheffield.
Wow.
Sonny Moore is Skrillex.
Yeah.
I still, only when the record come out and I was doing the writing credits, and I'm like, Sonny Moore? No, what? Skrillex wrote the vocal. This is mental. And then, you know, that becomes another seminal record. You know, everybody can see what happened with the Veld. Another beautiful, happy accident. Joel does not listen to people's vocals while he's streaming. He just doesn't do it. I still, to this day, have no idea how whoever kept getting at him on Twitter while he was streaming. I can't even remember what platform we were streaming on at the time, way before Twitch. And they go, you got to listen to it. And obviously that kept popping up in the chat. And he's like, oh, fuck it. Yeah, sure. And you can see the video. It still goes viral now. And the Veld is born. And so every vocal record has an amazing story, a beautiful story, an interesting story, you know, through whoever they are or the story behind it. I love, me personally as a music fan, I love those stories because the outside world thinks that, oh, everyone went in the studio, everyone had a lovely day, and these records were born, and whoa, look, this is how hit the record's made, and that's not how it happens.
Unless your name's Calvin Harris.
But of course, because Cal does it all himself. But that doesn't happen most other acts. You know,
no, it's so true, and I think that's the amazing thing is like, for me, just sitting back and seeing records that have been written in studios and kind of being in those sessions and kind of seeing the evolution of a record, and it's amazing to see what the power of song can do to the rest of the world. And I think it's also, it kind of comes from the power of the artist, the power of, I've always said this, especially with the Escape record. If I put Escape out myself, will hold my hands up and say that obviously we never know, because as the music business wouldn't have done what it did with Joel and Ryan. And I think there's levels of sometimes being able to just hold your hands up and go, you know what, like what happens for the record has to be best for the record as well. And
you're a good man, Will Clarke, because there's not many people that can be as philosophical as you're being right here, because, you know, there isn't. But you're a smart guy too, because you're probably right. You know, that record starting a super act, because that's what it did.
Yeah.
You know, into Halo coming out, 47,000 people in LA, and it going to US radio and going to top 40 and
Grammys, etc., etc.
All of that momentum, every piece of it made that record as big as it is. You're correct.
And the teams behind it. The teams behind it. Not just the artist, but the teams behind it, if you know what I mean. Like the magnitude of that record, if I put that out, which it was going to go out on my own label, like, let's be honest, at the point where Ryan, my manager, was still early days in management, I'd set up my own record label through, like, it was just all very small scale in the grand scheme of things. And when you put that on a massive level, like, you have the resources to be able to make something go a lot bigger than what it would if it was somebody smaller. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
It's just a fact.
You're right. I mean,
I do have a laugh with Ryan every time we get in the car. I was like, do you want to have a cry, mate? And put on Escape. Just every time.
I mean, there was a similar story. I mean, there's a very similar story back in the day with, you know, we just done a deal with Rock Nation, and Calvin had written, which would become the big Rihanna record, but it was Leona Lewis had cut it.
Oh, really?
And Jay Brown went, I've got to have that record for Rihanna.
Yeah.
And Mark had to ring Simon Cowell and tell him that she couldn't have the record anymore. It's gone to Rihanna. I mean, and you know, that was it's a very painful phone call to have to make to Mr. Cowell. But you know, that was a 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 streaming record, and the explosion of Calvin in the US into the next record with Rihanna and on Cal, you know, it's that was the rocket ship of Calvin in the US.
It really was. And I think that's it, is every artist needs a moment in their career that happens, right? And I think if you just keep going and keep writing records, you don't have one record in you. You have multiple records. You just got to keep writing.
Well, you got to have a career and longevity.
Yeah.
Well, back to a full circle conversation there of, we're in the music business, guys. You know, I need music, you know, and the reason that Joel has has kept a career. Yeah, he's got a great brand. He's great touring. But the reason that you go to those shows is because you want to listen to Deadmau5's hit records and listen to a great producer play his own music.
Yeah.
And that's why you can have a 20, 25-year career. And that's why Joel and Calvin will have a career as long as Calvin wants a career, because he's got so many hits and so on. And Tiesto's done the same. He's morphed into different variations of Tiesto, but there's always been big hit records. And, Armin's done the same. And, it's very rare, maybe Carl Cox, because Carl is the seminal DJ, right? Because, he's one of the most talented, if not the most talented technicians as a DJ in the world, and he knows how to work a crowd. But even if you go back to Sasha still became a superstar because of the music.
Yeah.
John Digweed with Nick Muir and For What I Dream Of on Train Spotting. You every single name that we could think about, there's been massive musical moments.
I agree. And it is so important. And I think that is the perfect way to end this conversation. Mr. Wilson, thank you very much for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
It's really been fun. It's, I realize when I do these kind of things that I say to my wife all the time, I think we should record our own podcast, or not even our own podcast. We should record our lives and just lock the doors for a day.
Yeah.
And then just record it all, even if it's just for our kids, because my story and her story and now our story is so amazing and rare that,
Dude, it's so rare. Like, there's literally a handful of people on this planet that have achieved what you guys have achieved. And I think just that's something to be proud of. Just for your kids. It's not about anybody else. It's all about the kids now, right? And I think that's the most important thing. So
yeah, I appreciate that. It is. Life is a precious thing, and kids make you realize that more than anything. So totally, I appreciate the time and really enjoyed it.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Keep safe. Send my love to the family. Mate. See you soon.
Will do. Thanks,
Cheers.
Mate.
Bye. And that's a wrap. Big love to Dean for coming on. I really appreciate you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. That was a really, really nice episode. Till next time, people, keep safe.